In the saga of the Rolling Stones, certain names loom larger than life. Mick Jagger, the electrifying frontman, Keith Richards, the riff-writing renegade, and founding members like Brian Jones or stalwart players such as Ronnie Wood. These figures are immortalised in the band's legend. Yet two gifted guitarists who shaped the Stones' sound from the shadows remain curiously overlooked. This is the hidden story of those unsung players. There's the strange case of the virtuoso who did the unthinkable. He handed in his notice. He remains the only guitarist to ever voluntarily resign from the biggest band in the world, walking away from the limelight largely because his name never appeared on the songs he helped transform. And then there is the Phantom. We will uncover the story of the session player who is virtually unknown to the casual fan, despite stamping his authority on a classic album. He struck such a powerful creative spark with Keith Richards that it reportedly unnerved Mick Jagger, arguably costing him his place in rock and roll history. The late 1960s found the Rolling Stones at a crossroads. By mid-1969, founding guitarist Brian Jones was out of the band he had helped create, spiralling into drug abuse and personal turmoil.
He was two things. He was not very nice, and he upset people very easily. He wasn't very pleasant.
The remaining Stones, Jagger, Richards, bassist Bill Wyman, and drummer Charlie Watts, faced a stark choice. Find a new guitarist capable of filling Jones's shoes or risk the band's future. They chose the former, and fate introduced them to a young virtuoso named Mick Taylor. Just 20 years old and already a prodigy of British blues, Mick Taylor had honed his craft with John Mayall's Blues Breakers, the same outfit that had nurtured Eric Clapton and Peter Green.
Joining the Rolling Stones, Ronnie. I'm very sort of happy to be joining them, you know.
Good.
I think things are going to go really well when we start working.
Good.
Taylor's reputation was that of a shy, soft-spoken musician with extraordinary skill. When the Stones invited him to a rehearsal in June 1969, he impressed them with his fluid playing and feel for blues and rock. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, accustomed to Brian Jones's rhythmic style, recognised something new in Taylor, a lyrical lead guitar voice that could soar above the band's grit. Before long, Taylor was asked to join the Rolling Stones as their new guitarist.
So in a sense, when I joined the group, it was virtually a new group. And because we've been doing live concerts during the past 2.5 years, the music has changed.
His live debut came almost immediately at a massive free concert in London's Hyde Park. On the 5th of July, 1969, just 3 days after Brian Jones's death, the Stones took the stage in front of 250,000 people. What was meant to be Mick Taylor's grand introduction also became a tribute to Jones.
Okay, now listen. Now will you just cool it just for a minute? Because I really would like to say something for Brian. And I'd really dig it if you would be with us when what I'm going to say. I really don't know how to do this sort of thing, but I'm going to try.
Amid a somber moment of remembrance, the band kicked off their set and Taylor launched into his first notes as a Rolling Stone. The young guitarist's tone was searing yet precise, cutting through the summer air on songs like Honky Tonk Women, which was one of the band's newest songs, and a hit single featuring Taylor's guitar work. If he felt pressure stepping into Jones's spot, Taylor didn't show it. His solos rang out confidently, heralding a new chapter for the band. Taylor's baptism by fire continued when the Stones embarked on a US tour later that year. He even endured the infamous chaos of Altamont in December, staying steady at his post as violence flared in the crowd. By the time the dust settled on 1969, Mick Taylor had entrenched himself as the band's new lead guitarist. The Rolling Stones had weathered a turbulent year, and this quiet 20-year-old proved he could anchor the storm. With Mick Taylor on board, the Rolling Stones entered what many fans and critics hail as their musical renaissance. From 1971 to 1973, the band released a string of classic albums now enshrined in rock history, and Taylor's fingerprints were all over these records. His presence didn't just replace Brian Jones, it fundamentally elevated the Stones' sound. The rough-edged rhythm and blues outfit of the early 60s evolved into a more expansive, improvisational band capable of surprising sophistication, thanks in large part to Taylor's fluent guitar work. The first real showcase of Taylor's impact came with Sticky Fingers in 1971. From the opening riff of Brown Sugar to the final notes of Moonlight Mile, the album crackles with new energy. Taylor's influence is evident in the guitar textures and solos. On the soulful rocker Sway, his expressive lead lines weave around Jagger's vocals, adding a passionate depth. Then, in Can't You Hear Me Knocking, a straightforward riff erupts into an extended jam. Suddenly the groove shifts, and Taylor takes off on a soaring, Latin-tinged solo that transforms the song into a showcase of virtuosity. The Rolling Stones had never recorded anything quite like that before. It was clear that with Mick Taylor they could venture into musical territory that previously seemed out of reach. The pattern continued on Exile on Main Street in 1972, often cited as the Stones' magnum opus. Recorded in a ramshackle basement in France, Exile is a tour through American roots music, from blues to country. Taylor's guitar became a guiding force amid the murk and chaos of those sessions. On tracks like All Down the Line and Tumbling Dice, his slide guitar slices through with jubilant precision. On the Slinky Ventilator Blues, he helped devise the central riff, one of the few times he earned an official writing credit with the Stones. Perhaps most beautifully, Taylor's melodic touch shines on ballads like Shine a Light, where his plaintive solo toward the song's end lifts the gospel-infused piece to soulful heights. Live recordings from this era likewise captured how Taylor had turbocharged the Stones. Concert staples such as Midnight Rambler swelled from gritty blues numbers into epic jams, thanks largely to Taylor's improvisational bravery on stage. He could make his guitar sing, scream or cry as the moment demanded, bringing dynamics and drama that mesmerized audiences. Even Mick Jagger and Keith Richards later admitted how critical Taylor's contributions were. Jagger reflected that Taylor's fluent, melodic style made the band very musical during those years, something neither Richards nor successor Ronnie would ever replicate in the same way. Richards, for his part, relished having a foil whose lead playing could dance atop his riffs.
Mick Taylor opened up some beautiful possibilities, and especially in recording, because I would just lay down 3 or 4 different rhythm guitars. Mick was very much a solo player.
Some devotees of the Stones argue to this day that the lineup with Mick Taylor was the band's finest. The evidence is in those grooves and performances. With Taylor, the Rolling Stones reached a level of musical virtuosity and adventurousness that cemented their legend. Yet behind the curtain of that golden era, not all was harmonious.
Was being in the Stones a great gig, or was it hell?
It was both. Heaven and hell. Roller coaster ride.
By 1973, Mick Taylor was feeling increasingly frustrated and alienated within the Rolling Stones. The very qualities that made him invaluable, his youth, his virtuosity and his creative instincts, also set him apart in a band defined by the older, tightly bonded Jagger-Richards partnership. Taylor was still in his early 20s, much younger than the others, and he was not a founding member. He sometimes felt like a junior partner, no matter how much he contributed. Creative tensions began to fester. Taylor found himself brimming with musical ideas during recording sessions. Often he'd come up with a brilliant melody or crucial riff for a song, but when the credits were printed, those songs remained attributed solely to Jagger-Richards. The Rolling Stones' songwriting credits were fiercely guarded by the Glimmer Twins, and Taylor's input went officially unrecognized. This stung him. He had helped shape the moody contours of Moonlight Mile, the gentle beauty of Winter, and the elegant progression of Time Waits for No One. In each case, he contributed significantly, especially the last, calling it his extended lyrical guitar solo, yet received no writing credit. Seeing his work go uncredited and unrewarded ate at Taylor. It wasn't just about money, it was about artistic acknowledgement.
But it can be a bit, it is frustrating on an individual level. But I think it is for everybody who's a part of a group, you know, because a group is a collective entity, you know.
Life on the road and in the studio also took its toll. The Rolling Stones in the early 70s lived notoriously hard. Keith Richards was sinking deeper into heroin addiction, often leaving others, including Taylor, to hold things together musically. To cope with the stress and the culture around him, Taylor drifted into heavy drug use as well. The quiet, polite young man who joined in 1969 was becoming more withdrawn and troubled. Those close to the band noticed that Taylor's mood had darkened, his confidence eroding under the weight of drug dependency and feeling undervalued. Meanwhile, Richards, who was like an older brother but also a competitor, could be dismissive of Taylor's polished style. The Stones had always thrived on a raw, ragged edge. There were hints that Keith felt too much virtuosity might dilute their grit. Taylor's very excellence was, paradoxically, a subtle source of friction. By late 1974, Mick Taylor had reached a breaking point. Even on the Stones' 1974 album It's Only Rock and Roll, Taylor's final studio outing with the band, his playing shone. The track Time Waits for No One is essentially his swan song, a graceful extended guitar piece that seemed to say all he couldn't express within the band. Yet behind the scenes, he was at his limit. He had begun to believe that his journey with the Rolling Stones had run its course. The end, when it came, was sudden and dramatic. In December 1974, the Rolling Stones gathered in London for a party, by most accounts an end-of-year celebration after finishing work on It's Only Rock and Roll. On the 12th of December 1974, Mick Taylor chose that moment to drop his bombshell. Pulling Mick Jagger aside, he quietly informed him that he was quitting the band. He became the first member in Rolling Stones history to quit of his own accord, and no one in the camp saw it coming.
Towards the end of my period with the Stones, it got very laborious and monotonous, and a lot of people, there were a lot of people around the Stones that seemed to drag them down and hold them back, and you know, obviously the certain people's addiction to drugs didn't help.
Jagger was stunned. The others initially thought Taylor might be joking or acting impulsively, but he was in earnest. Right at the brink of a new album and plans for another world tour, the Rolling Stones' brilliant lead guitarist was walking away.
The two Micks, Mick Jagger and Mick Taylor, when Mick leaned across me from the right, he leaned over to Mick and he said, Mick, I'm leaving the band. And Mick said, what? And I sort of leaned back to get out of the way. And Mick said, you're joking? He said, no, I really am leaving the band. And he got up and kind of left. And Mick looked at me and he said, what am I going to do? Do you think he was serious? I said, I think he was, Mick. So it was an awkward atmosphere for a little bit.
Jagger tried to persuade Taylor to reconsider. He suggested that maybe Taylor just needed a break, some time off to sort out personal matters and rest. But Taylor was resolute. He calmly explained that he'd had enough. In the official press release that followed, Taylor's departure was couched in polite terms. He said it was simply time to move on, and that he had no hard feelings toward the band. Internally, however, the shock was profound. The Rolling Stones, a group often branded as the bad boys who would never quit on each other, had been left by one of their own. Keith Richards, though outwardly stoic, was reportedly furious and felt betrayed that Taylor would leave them high and dry. Charlie Watts and Bill Wyman, more phlegmatic by nature, simply absorbed the news with concern for the band's future. Mick Taylor, at only 25 years old, stepped off the Stones' runaway train and into an uncertain future. He talked about wanting to form his own group or play with other musicians more on his wavelength. Though he continued to make music in the years to come, he never again reached the commercial heights he had with the Stones. He had traded the stadiums and private jets for small clubs and a quieter life. Later, Taylor would insist he did not regret his decision. He valued his peace of mind and health too much. When asked if he regretted leaving, he often replied that the real question was whether he regretted joining in the first place. It was a pointed reminder of just how draining his Rolling Stones experience had become by the end.
Mick, haven't you been thinking for some time about leaving the Stones?
Yes, it had been sort of in the back of my mind for quite a long time. I mean, my role as lead guitarist has always been very satisfying, especially playing live on stage, which is where I feel I made my greatest contribution towards the group. But as my own sort of music started to develop, it became more and more difficult to sort of express myself within the style of the group.
Now the Rolling Stones faced a perilous moment. How to continue without the very guitarist who had helped them achieve some of their finest work. As 1975 dawned, the Rolling Stones were once again a guitarist short. The last time this happened, in 1969, they found Mick Taylor. Now they needed another saviour on 6 strings. The pressure was immense. The Stones were scheduled to record a new album and had a major summer tour on the horizon. Cancelling was not in their DNA. They needed a solution, and fast. In the immediate term, Keith Richards picked up much of the slack in the studio. Ever the workhorse when motivated, Keith laid down multiple guitar parts on demos and early takes for the next album. But everyone knew the Stones' alchemy required 2 guitarists in tandem. The search for a replacement began almost at once, and it played out in an unconventional way. Instead of formal auditions behind closed doors, the Stones turned their recording sessions into a testing ground for new guitar talent. Throughout early 1975, as the band convened to work on tracks that would eventually surface on the album Black and Blue, they invited a rotating cast of guitarists to sit in. Some were famous names. Jeff Beck, one of Britain's most lauded guitar heroes, came by to jam, though he left after a brief try, joking that things moved too slowly for his liking. Rory Gallagher, the fiery Irish bluesman, plugged in and played a session. Steve Marriott and Peter Frampton, both once of Humble Pie, were also floated as possibilities. But often it was the less obvious choices who stuck around longer. Harvey Mandel, an inventive American guitarist known for his psychedelic blues style, joined the studio jams and clicked with the band. And then there was Wayne Perkins, a name unfamiliar to most Stones fans at the time, but one that would soon become entwined with this chapter of their story. Wayne Perkins came to the Rolling Stones' attention with a little help from Eric Clapton. Perkins was a Birmingham, Alabama native and a respected session guitarist. By his mid-20s, he had played on records by artists ranging from soul singer Donny Hathaway to reggae icon Bob Marley. It's Perkins who plays the fluid lead guitar on Marley's Concrete Jungle. In early 1975, Eric Clapton encountered Perkins during a trip to Jamaica and learned that the Stones were in dire need of a guitarist. Clapton promptly phoned Mick Jagger to recommend the talented American. Not long after, Wayne Perkins was invited to Munich to join the Stones at Musicland Studios, where they had begun recording what would become Black and Blue. It was an audition, but an unorthodox one. Perkins would be writing and recording with the band in real time. To help him acclimate, Keith Richards had Wayne stay with him at the Wick, guitarist Ronnie Wood's London house that Keith was borrowing. Richards and Perkins hit it off from the start. Both loved the blues, and Keith was impressed by Wayne's southern-inflected style and his experience with reggae rhythms. Over days of informal jamming, the two bonded like old friends. By the time Mick Jagger joined them in the studio, Wayne Perkins already felt almost like part of the inner circle, lounging with Keith and strumming guitars. Jagger took note. Perkins himself later remarked that Mick didn't approve of seeing Keith and him writing together. The famed Jagger-Richards songwriting partnership was a guarded thing, and any outside creative bonding might have been viewed as a threat. Still, the musical rapport was a promising sign. When recording sessions ramped up, Wayne Perkins showed what he could do. The Rolling Stones began cutting new tracks and urged Perkins to play freely and make his mark. He did not disappoint. One standout was Hand of Fate, a tough, riffy rock song. As they jammed on it, Perkins conjured up a stinging lead guitar line that danced around Richards' chords. His guitar solo on the finished take is a thing of beauty, fierce and fluid, the notes tumbling out in bluesy bursts. Hand of Fate would eventually be hailed by fans as a highlight of the album, largely because of that exhilarating solo, courtesy of Wayne Perkins. Perkins contributed to other songs as well. Memory Motel, a wistful 7-minute ballad, featured his subtle acoustic guitar threading through the keyboards and vocals. On the gentle soul number Fool to Cry, he overdubbed a delicate slide guitar motif, adding a wistful sweetness to the track. In truth, Wayne ended up playing on a good portion of the album. He and the Stones also recorded a number of loose jams, just testing ideas and feeling each other out. Some of these experiments would later resurface. Notably, the group worked up a funky groove during these sessions that years later emerged, with added vocals, as Worried About You.
Sometime I wonder why.
When that song was finally released in the 80s, listeners were treated to a dazzling guitar solo near its climax. Unbeknownst to them, they were hearing Wayne Perkins' hands from 1975, delivering one of the most stunning solos in the Stones' catalogue. As the sessions wore on, Wayne Perkins grew confident that he was on track to become a permanent Rolling Stone. He was collaborating smoothly and even contributing to writing jams. At one point, the band's enthusiasm was such that a photographer took group shots of Jagger, Richards, Watts, Wyman and Perkins, envisioning how this young American might look in the next Rolling Stones lineup. Keith Richards publicly hinted that his favourite contender for the guitar slot was already right here in the room, referring to Perkins. All signs seem to suggest that Wayne just might be the next Rolling Stones guitarist. Yet being a Rolling Stone involves more than playing well. Band chemistry, image, and timing are everything. By the spring of 1975, even as Wayne Perkins was impressing his would-be bandmates, another figure appeared on the stage, Ronnie Wood. Ronnie was an old friend of the Stones and guitarist for the Faces. Unlike Perkins, Wood came from the same British rock scene and carried the same piratical swagger as Jagger and Richards. As the Faces were winding down, Ronnie Wood let it be known that he was available and eager to join the Stones, even if just for their upcoming tour. The band, facing the pressure of live commitments, took him on as a temporary touring member for the massive Tour of the Americas in the summer of 1975.
And Mick said, "What am I going to do? Would you join?" And I said, "Yeah, but I mean, I don't want to split the Faces up." And he said, "No, nor do I." And I said, "I'll tell you what, ring me up if you get desperate." And a year later, I was ill in bed in LA, and I got this phone call from Mick. He said, "I'm desperate, will you come and help?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." Anyway, I walked in with Hey Negrita, and I said, "Come on, we're going to play this." And Charlie said, "Look, we've hardly ever met him, and he's bossing us around already."
Practically overnight, Wayne Perkins saw the momentum shift. The tour was a roaring success, with Ronnie Wood on stage alongside Keith. Their camaraderie and woven guitar interplay fit the Stones' vibe perfectly. Wood wasn't as technically skilled a soloist as Taylor or Perkins, but he brought a rollicking energy and a knack for weaving his rhythm parts with Keith's, restoring the old Stones style of two guitars meshing as one.
Even before he joined the Stones, I'd been working with Ron and always enjoyed playing with him. So when the slot arrived it was almost as if it was predestined that Ronnie should join the band. I know he feels the same way, because he told me that when he was just starting out and he saw the Stones, he said, "I'm going to be in that band."
Offstage, Ronnie's personality meshed seamlessly too. He could banter, party, and face the press with Jagger and Richards like he'd always been there. As the tour concluded, the Stones had to decide on a permanent guitarist. Wayne Perkins had given them excellent contributions in the studio, and in another world he might have stayed on. But several factors tilted the decision. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards were conscious of the band's image. The Rolling Stones were a British rock institution, and bringing in an American as a full member felt off-brand to them. Keith later admitted that Ronnie's Englishness and long friendship with the band played a big part in their choice. There was also the sense that, after years of the mercurial Mick Taylor, the Stones wanted someone who prioritised the band's overall feel over virtuoso solos. Jagger commented at the time that Ronnie Wood wasn't a virtuoso like Perkins or Taylor, but that the band is the virtuoso, implying that Wood's style served the group coherence better. In the end, Ronnie Wood was offered the job and officially joined the Rolling Stones in 1976. Wayne Perkins, meanwhile, was thanked sincerely and let go. For Perkins, it was surely a bitter disappointment. One day he had been writing songs with the Stones and imagining a life as their new guitarist. The next, he was reading news reports that Ronnie Wood had gotten the gig. Ever the professional, Perkins moved on quietly. He continued his career as a respected session musician, even turning down an offer to join Lynyrd Skynyrd around that time. But his brush with the Rolling Stones became one of rock's great what-ifs. When the Rolling Stones released Black and Blue in April 1976, casual fans saw Ronnie Wood in the album artwork and assumed he had played on it all. In truth, Ronnie's guitar appeared only sparingly. It was Wayne Perkins and Harvey Mandel who had shaped much of the record's guitar sound. The album yielded the hit ballad Fool to Cry and fan favourites like Hand of Fate, and it showcased the Stones dabbling in funk, soul and reggae. Reviews were mixed, but over time many came to appreciate its groove-driven charm. Still, almost nobody outside the band's inner circle knew just how critical Wayne Perkins had been to the project. The Stones, now moving forward with Ronnie, did not emphasise the contributions of the auditioning guitarists. As years passed, only liner notes and avid music writers preserved the knowledge that the biting guitar on Hand of Fate was an Alabama session player at work, or that the elegant fills on Memory Motel came from his fingers. Eventually, time and nostalgia mellowed the relationships. In 1989, the Rolling Stones were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Mick Taylor was invited and included in that honour as a former band member, an implicit recognition of his important role. Decades later, the Stones did even more to acknowledge him. In 2012, as the band marked its 50th anniversary with celebratory tours, Mick Taylor was brought on as a special guest at several shows. Night after night, he would step out to join his old bandmates on songs like Midnight Rambler, his signature fluid licks once again sparking that old magic alongside Jagger's wails and Richard's grinding chords. Fans, many of whom weren't even born when Taylor was originally in the band, roared in appreciation. It was a fitting, if long overdue, curtain call for the guitarist whose contributions had once been downplayed. Wayne Perkins' name never achieved the same public recognition, but rock historians and devoted Stones fans eventually pieced together his story. Today, Black and Blue itself has been reappraised by fans, who recognise how much Perkins contributed to its feel. Without his playing, some of its best moments might never have materialised. Listeners who adore the song Worried About You now know that it's his sublime solo lighting up the track. The fact that some of the Stones' mid-70s sound was shaped by an unsung American guitarist adds a fascinating footnote to the band's lore. Perkins remains, in a sense, the Rolling Stone that never was, a reminder of how easily things might have gone differently. It is almost as if the band's narrative tried to leap from Brian Jones in the 60s straight to Ronnie Wood in the late 70s, quietly papering over the transformational years in between and the people who powered them. Keith Richards has never been shy about praising the artists that inspired him growing up. But which bands made the biggest impression on him? Click the thumbnail on screen to find out.